All right, so I wanted to take a moment and do a little bit of a training on unconscious bias, specifically as it pertains to race. I get this a lot from people, especially when they're taking my programs. They go, I want to recognize my unconscious bias and I want to get rid of it. Which to them I say, that is a really great thing. I'm so glad that you have that goal. It's more or less impossible because the nature of the phrase unconscious means it is not within your conscious. People aren't consciously being biased. I do think people would like to be objective, but they are unconsciously biased. So my advice for my one-on-one clients, organizations that I work with is actually pretty simple. Set a goal around diversity inclusion, a specific project, a specific initiative. Run towards it as fast as you can, diligently, and the pain points of that are going to show you where your unconscious bias is. And for them, I usually say, let's make a game out of it. And I do this because unconscious bias is not just a sensitive subject for people receiving it. Like as a Black American, like I experience unconscious bias all the time. But I'm also unconscious of the unconscious bias that is being shown to me. So I'm only aware of a small part of it, but I know that it's also out there. Again, it's hidden beneath the surface. And the times that I have called out unconscious bias, because it's unconscious and it exists within someone's shadow, they have an allergic reaction to when I bring it up, regardless of its truth value. And what a lot of people will do actually is deny, discredit, or find a way to dismiss what I have observed, which creates sort of a double loop. Suddenly someone is unconscious about the negative reaction they are having to being called out for unconscious bias, which makes me feel terrible, means the issue isn't addressed, and now someone is on the lookout to hide any evidence that they might be having unconscious bias instead of having a productive conversation. So my strategy and the thing that I give people is unconscious bias is a game. You only get points by being able to collect it. It's not something to avoid, it's something to just be observed. And in fact, you have to collect a lot of data before you can make a lot of action. This is where something like a diversity panel comes in. Now, many people see a diversity panel as like, oh, are they gonna police us? Are they gonna be checking us around? Is it gonna be HR trying to find fault with us? If you design it well, no, because everything about how that energy shows up makes people fearful, which means that they're not actually gonna do work, which could actually get in the way of productivity. A good diversity panel's job is to really just observe, collect as much data as possible without intervening, which can sometimes be hard. So when you bring people onto this panel, let them know that like this might take a while. And then if you want to empower them to take sort of direct action, make sure that you've got good training for that. But a diversity panel, as it pertains to unconscious bias, collects so much data so that when their findings are eventually presented, there's no question. There's really no opportunity for people to discredit it. It's too robust. And then they provide solutions that say, okay, now that we've found this stuff, let's dig a few levels deeper. Because there's another thing that happens with unconscious bias is that sometimes it is negative, purposefully negative, judgmental, and sometimes it's just sort of ignorant. And when you can go those different layers, you can find out what the actual cause is. Sometimes for racial bias, for example, people legitimately think that Black people are worse than them. And it's something that comes out as being a part of their cultural environment. All the subliminal messages have shown them that my experience isn't as valuable as theirs. And so it's unconscious for them. Now, at a deeper layer, they might have unconscious bias because of specific interactions that they've had with people of color and their sort of own personal experience. It is important to separate these two because the interventions for them are totally different. Someone who is raised in a culture that is promoting a certain kind of unconscious bias, that's sort of a collective work that everyone does. And the advice that you give them is going to be more general, but less specific. For someone who's had specific interactions, you're going to have to find a way to be in conversation with those specific interactions, open up a broader dialogue. Honestly, in a lot of ways, these interventions can look like therapy and coaching and mentoring. It takes a lot more work to do this one, but it's a lot more rewarding because since the unconscious bias is coming from conscious events, they can sort of be worked with. So this is two important kind of interventions. And how this pertains to, say, your material operates at the top level of some deeper organizational or personal belief identity structures. So if you can knock things out at the bottom, it'll trickle all the way to the top. But if you're not willing to go deep, anything that you change on the top is really just going to be hiding sort of the root problem. And so creating a culture in which it is safe, fun, effective, easy, and fast to have these discussions on these sort of deep issues is really going to be the fastest way for you to truly protect yourself from any instances of unconscious bias. So to end this off, I want to just sort of show you two different people and two different organizations. One organization goes after unconscious bias just by keeping their eyes a little bit open and continuing to move forward. And when they encounter incidents, are able to sort of pause, look at situations at all angles, and find a way to have the discussion about what's coming up in a way that doesn't trigger more sort of situations. Say you have an individual who's just going about their life, going after their goals, and in the pursuit of that, or maybe find out that they are biased in a certain way. They have the capacity, tools to bring all of their perspectives online, learn from them, and keep moving forward after sort of taking a break and deciding that this is sort of the best for them. In contrast, there are organizations that are told that there's unconscious bias going on and they immediately react. And maybe they get the trainings and maybe they get interventions in and they run around and they try and find the people who are doing wrong. Or maybe they don't do anything at all, in fact, hunker down and get super defensive. In both of those situations, even the one that's intervening that seems like they're moving in the right way, they haven't prepared themselves to continually grow and change. In fact, you can kind of sense that there's a contraction with that organization. And in the same way, individuals that do that contract within themselves and actually make it more difficult to deal with the issue on the next time. So really just keeping those in mind will help you sort of get an intuitive sense of where your unconscious bias is. But the big things that you need to have is openness, responsiveness instead of reactiveness, and the ability to take multiple perspectives and to hear from multiple perspectives. So hope this was helpful. Let me know what you think.